When I met Eva, she had just turned 23. I was 41, fresh out of a long, quiet divorce, and still nursing the idea that life had already handed me the best of what it had to offer. Then she showed up, all spark and spontaneity, and I felt like I had stepped into a second act I didn't know I was allowed to have. She said she liked that I listened, that I didn't talk to fill the silence. I liked how she saw the world, unpolished and full of possibility. We moved fast, maybe too fast. But when we got married a year later, I wasn't thinking about the calendar. I was thinking about how she looked at me like I still had something to teach her. The first year was easy. Sunday mornings in the kitchen, barefoot laughter, candlelit dinners that turned into long talks on the balcony. Her favorite phrase was, "You always make things feel safe." But then came the small shifts. She started going to bed with her earbuds in, started texting during our dinners, laughed less at my jokes. At first, I told myself it was work stress. She just started a new marketing position, big agency, big hours. But even the stress had a different texture now, secretive, distant, like a wall with no door. I found myself waiting for her stories at the end of the day. She used to tell me everything: what the guy in IT said, which client was a nightmare, who brought donuts. Now I got headlines, summaries, polite smiles. One night, I came home late and found her on the balcony. She was on the phone, speaking low, in that half-laughing voice she used to use with me. When she noticed me, she hung up quickly, said it was just her friend Jenna. I nodded. I even smiled. But something had shifted. I felt it, like a draft in a closed room. I wasn't ready to ask the hard questions yet, maybe because I already knew the answers. I didn't notice it all at once. It wasn't like the movies, no lipstick on the collar or hushed phone calls in the bathroom. It was subtler than that, more like absence in the room. She was there, but something about her wasn't. At first, I chalked it up to age. Maybe I was boring now, in bed by 10, talking about mutual funds and weather apps. May had become the safe harbor she needed for a time, but no longer the storm she wanted to chase. She started spending more time out. Pilates turned into late dinners with friends from class. I asked once if I could come meet them. She laughed like I'd made a dad joke. "You'd be bored out of your mind," she said, flipping her hair. "We mostly talk about stuff you hate, influencer drama, skincare routines." So I stayed home. I cleaned the kitchen, fixed the cabinet door that had been squeaking for weeks, walked our dog, Misha, alone under quiet, empty skies, and I told myself that this was just a season. But seasons pass. This lingered. One night, I woke up and she wasn't in bed. Her phone was still on the nightstand, but the sliding door to the balcony was cracked open. I stepped out quietly and saw her sitting on the lounger, knees pulled to her chest, staring into the dark. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked. She startled a little, then forced a smile. "Yeah, just a lot on my mind." I wanted to ask what, but I didn't. I was afraid of the answer. It was a Tuesday. Rain against the windows, the kind that turns the world gray and soft around the edges. She had left in a hurry for a networking brunch downtown, late as usual, swearing and hopping around on one leg as she tried to find her other heel. Her phone was still charging on the kitchen counter when the door slammed behind her. I didn't mean to look, not at first. I picked it up automatically, intending to text her, "You forgot this," but the screen lit up with a notification before I could open the messaging app. "Can't stop thinking about last night. When can I see you again?" No name, just a number, just those words, like an electric jolt through my chest. My thumb hovered. I didn't want to know. I already knew. But I tapped. The thread opened. Dozens of messages, scattered through weeks, a slow burn that had turned into a fire while I was still standing in the ashes of what I thought we had. "You looked incredible in that dress. I couldn't take my eyes off you." "He doesn't suspect?" "You're so different with me. I love who you are when you're not pretending." I sat down, the phone still warm in my hand. Different with him. Not pretending. The part that broke me wasn't the sex, though I could read between the lines, the late nights, the lies. It was the idea that the version of her I loved might never have been the full truth. Or worse, maybe it had been once, but I lost her along the way, piece by piece. She came home later that day, smiling, damp from the rain. She didn't notice I was quieter than usual. Or maybe she did, and decided not to ask. I watched her make tea, watched her tuck her hair behind her ear with a grace I knew too well. And I wondered, do I confront her now? Or wait and see who she really is when she thinks I still don't know. She didn't lie. Not this time. I waited until the house was quiet. No background TV, no kids playing, no excuse to change the subject. Just the two of us. Her on the couch, legs pulled under her like she always sat when she was anxious. Me across from her, holding the truth like a stone in my chest. I saw the messages, I said. At first, nothing. A flicker of something behind her eyes. Shock, maybe, but not denial. She closed her eyes, took a breath, and said, "I'm sorry." That was it. I let the silence sit between us until it was too heavy for either of us to ignore. "Why?" I asked. "Why him? Why this?" She looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in weeks. "It wasn't about him," she said slowly. "Not really. It wasn't even about you." She started picking at a thread on the couch cushion, not meeting my eyes. I feel lost. Like I woke up one day and realized I'm not who I thought I'd be at 25. I married a man I admired, someone stable, someone safe, but I never figured out who I was outside of that, outside of you. I didn't speak. She went on. When I met him, it was like suddenly I was this different version of myself. Younger, freer. He didn't see me as your wife or Lily's stepmom. He just saw me. And I wanted that so badly, I didn't stop to think about what I was destroying. Her voice cracked just a little. "I didn't cheat because I stopped loving you," she added. "I cheated because I stopped knowing myself." That stung worse than if she'd said she didn't love me at all, because it meant the whole thing wasn't even personal. It was about the space inside her that I could never reach, no matter how much I gave. She didn't move out, and I didn't ask her to. Maybe that makes me weak, or maybe it just makes me human. When you build a life with someone, routines, memories, bills, toothbrushes side by side, ending it isn't as clean as closing a door. So we lived in limbo. Days were quiet, civil. We talked about groceries, the weather, the kids' school fundraiser. We passed plates at dinner like everything was normal. But under it all, tension hummed like a low electrical current we both pretended not to feel. At night, we slept in the same bed, backs turned like strangers. Some nights, I'd hear her crying softly into the pillow. I never said anything. I didn't know if it was guilt or grief, and I wasn't sure which one would hurt more to acknowledge. And me? I was angry. Not the kind that explodes, the kind that settles deep like sediment. I'd go to work, laugh with clients, fix things with my hands. Then I'd come home to this strange version of our marriage and wonder how long it could last. But I also couldn't bring myself to say the words, leave. I still loved her. That was the worst of it. Even now, after all the betrayal, my heart would still jump when she brushed past me, or when she wore the sweater I always said brought out her eyes. And I hated that about myself. Some days we'd almost forget. We'd make coffee at the same time, smile, and for a second I'd believe maybe we could be okay, that people could make mistakes and come back from them. Other days, the silence between us was sharp enough to cut bone. We started therapy again. Not for healing, not yet, but to have a space where things could be said out loud, where we didn't have to pretend. Sometimes I'd sit there across from her in that bland beige room and think, how did we end up here? And I think she wondered the same thing. Neither of us knew what came next, but we weren't ready to let go. Not yet. It caught me off guard, the way I started noticing other women again. Not in the reckless, impulsive way of a man looking to even the score. It was quieter than that. Subtle. A slow thaw. A part of me that had been frozen for months, maybe longer, beginning to come back to life. There was Mara. She worked at the community center where I'd started volunteering on Thursdays. Early 30s, smart eyes, didn't pry. We talked mostly about small things, woodworking, books, the kids she worked with, but I noticed the way she laughed at my dry jokes, the way she paid attention. She saw me. I didn't chase anything. I wasn't looking, but I didn't walk away from it either. One Thursday, she handed me a flyer for an upcoming art fair, and on the back she'd scribbled in pen, "Hope you show your pieces this year. You're better than you think." I folded it and stuck it in my jacket, didn't think twice about it, until my wife found it while doing laundry. That evening she was quiet, not cold, just watching me. At dinner she asked, "How's your volunteering going? Still talking to that Mara woman?" I paused. "Yeah, she's nice." "Nice." She stabbed at her food. "You spending a lot of time with her?" I looked at her, straight on. "We talk, that's it. You know, talking. Something you and I haven't done in a long time. Her face shifted. Not anger, exactly. Something closer to panic. I just thought we were trying to fix things, she said, her voice low. I didn't think you'd start looking elsewhere. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. You don't get to be jealous, I said. Not now, not after everything. She looked down, lips tight. I saw her swallow hard. Maybe she didn't expect it to sting like this. Maybe she thought I'd stay broken forever, that the guilt would keep me tame. But something in me had shifted. I haven't done anything wrong, I added. I haven't crossed a line. Can you say the same? She didn't answer, just stared at her plate as if it might say something she couldn't. I wanted to feel triumphant, vindicated, but I didn't. All I felt was tired, tired of circling the same drain, tired of being angry, then numb, then angry again. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was the one who strayed, but now she was the one unraveling, because I'd finally stopped orbiting around her. Maybe that's what she hadn't counted on. I started staying later at the community center. Not intentionally at first, just finishing projects, helping Mara sort supplies, hanging a new shelf someone had been putting off for weeks. But those moments stretched. We'd talk while putting things away, sharing stories that didn't have the weight of history attached to them. There were no minds to avoid in conversation, no eggshells. With Mara, I didn't feel like a man who'd been betrayed. I didn't feel like a man constantly questioning if every small act of kindness was sincere or just guilt dressed up as effort. I felt seen. I didn't lie to my wife. I didn't have to. I just let the space grow between us until it became something she couldn't ignore. You're always there lately, she said one night, her voice carefully neutral as I came home after 9. They need help. We've got a fundraiser coming. And Mara needs help too? I looked at her, not with anger, just tired honesty. She listens to me. The words hung there, heavy, true. She blinked, her mouth opened slightly, then closed. For once, she didn't have a comeback. I didn't mean to twist the knife, but maybe I was done protecting her from the pain she once so easily handed me. At dinner, we'd sit across from each other with nothing to say. The kids were with her mom for the week, and without them as a buffer, the silence felt cavernous. We tried a movie once, sat through the whole thing barely breathing. I could feel her stealing glances at me during the quiet scenes, like she was trying to read me or remember how. But I was slipping. Each day I spent with Mara, I felt myself loosening the threads that tied me to my wife. I didn't even know what that meant yet, what I was walking toward, but I knew what I was walking away from. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like survival. It was a Wednesday night when she finally said it. We were in the kitchen. I was rinsing out a coffee mug. She stood by the counter, hands wrapped around a glass of water she hadn't sipped. I think I broke something I don't know how to fix, she said. I didn't look at her right away. I wasn't sure I could, but her voice was different. Not defensive, not sharp or layered in guilt. Just quiet. Honest in the way people get when they're cornered by their own reflection. I used to wait for you to say the right thing, she continued, to fight harder for me, but I never asked myself what I was giving back. I put the mug down and turned to her. She met my eyes. There was no anger there, just a woman who looked like she was finally seeing the full picture, and maybe hating parts of it. When you started pulling away, she said, I wanted to blame you. I told myself it was punishment, but it's not. It's just consequence. She sat down, eyes glassy now. I was selfish. I let things rot inside and acted like I had no part in the decay. I nodded slowly, not to agree or to forgive, but to acknowledge the weight of what she said. For the first time since all of it, she wasn't just saying sorry. She was owning it. I didn't know how much I wanted you, she whispered, until you stopped being mine in that way. Her voice cracked at mine. And I realized something cruel but honest. She wanted me again, not because she loved me, maybe not even because she missed me, but because she didn't want to be the one left behind. Because now she knew what that felt like. I didn't answer. I couldn't yet. I just sat across from her at the kitchen table, in the house we'd built, in the life we'd both worn down with silence and slow mistakes. I didn't know what would come next. But for once, we were both facing the truth. And sometimes that's the beginning of the end, or the first honest chapter in something else entirely. I didn't plan to leave her that night. It wasn't some grand strategy or well thought out act of revenge. But when she asked me where I was going and I looked her in the eye and said, out, I knew I wasn't coming back anytime soon. I didn't slam the door. I didn't raise my voice. I just walked out. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't always end in a storm. Sometimes it's quiet, like a thread slowly unraveling. Mara didn't ask questions when I showed up at her place. She opened the door, saw my face, and let me in. There was no judgment, just presence. I didn't need to explain why I was there. Maybe that's why I ended up at our door and not someone else's. With Mara, I didn't feel like a failure. I didn't feel like a fool. It wasn't love. Not yet. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was comfort. It was warmth. And yes, if I'm being honest, it was also a kind of punishment. Not just for her, but maybe for both of us. For me, for not seeing it coming. For her, for making me feel replaceable. I lay awake that night on Mara's couch, staring at the ceiling. My phone buzzed, 3 messages, all from my wife. I didn't open them. I couldn't. Not because I didn't care, but because I knew they'd be filled with questions she was never ready to answer when I needed them. There was no satisfaction in what I'd done, just space. Space between what we were and what we'd become.